actually crazy. This is my first run review and I already have gum on the bottom of the shoe. That's crazy. I already tried to clean it off, but as you know, getting gum off the bottom of your shoes, no bueno. We're off to a great start. What's going on, guys? Today we are going to be talking about the long and awaited first run review on the Nike Pegasus Premium. I finally got my hands on a pair. I think they weren't as hard to get some of the other colorways, but I kind of stopped looking for them after I couldn't get the first two colorways, and then this colorway rolled out. I thought it looked decent. I didn't think it was my first choice, to be honest, but in person, I think that this Persian Volt colorway is actually super, super nice. So with all that being said, I just came back from my first run in these. I only ran 2 miles, so let's get right into the first run review. So starting out on the outsole, as you can see, got that gum still in there, but as you can see, we have a pretty traditional Nike waffle pattern on the outsole. And I would say that this rubber feels a little bit stickier or a little bit softer than a lot of the other Nike waffle patterns they put on the other shoes, like the Vomero 18 as well as the Pegasus 41. But that's just kind of my hypothesis. I don't really have any scientific evidence to back up that this rubber compound is softer than those. It's just based off of a touch basis. But overall, I mean, I only ran on the asphalt. I ran on the road, so it was really sunny as well, so I didn't have any traction issues while I was running, which I wouldn't hope so for 2 miles. And as for durability, I mean, who even knows right now? I mean, there's only 2, maybe 3 miles in the shoe because I did go on a little walk afterwards, but these lugs do look pretty thick, and I would hope so to protect that luscious air bubble that we have over here, which brings us to the cushion setup of the Pegasus Premium. So this is probably the most captivating part of this shoe in my opinion, and it's the reason why I really wanted to get my hands on the pair, even though that price was outrageous. So as you can see, we have a full length, super high stack height of Nike Zoom X on the top layer. The middle layer is that full length Zoom unit, and then the bottom layer, at least a little bit in the heel, is Nike React X. I believe the stack height is around 45, 46 millimeters in the heel, dropping to 35, 36 millimeters in the forefoot, giving it a 10 millimeter heel to toe drop, but I will confirm it on the screen above. And as for how it performed on the first run, as I said, I only ran 2 miles in the shoe, and I ran pretty fast, or at least fast for me. I ran around my marathon pace, or my goal marathon pace, which is around 8:40, 8:45. And honestly, it didn't feel like I was pushing it or anything. Like, I mean, given it was only 2 miles, I still felt like it was pretty effortless. And I think that that's due to maybe the cushion setup of this shoe. Now, this shoe is pretty heavy due to carrying a full length air unit as well as a lot of foam and material. But on foot, when I started running, it did feel like pretty light on the feet, which was really surprising. I don't know if it's the weight distribution of the shoe or whatnot, but I also think that the cushion setup is pretty responsive, or it feels pretty bouncy, especially when going at those slower paces. When I did start to pick up the pace as I was dropping down to marathon pace for those 2 miles, I did feel like the foam or the air bubble started to kind of react a little bit quicker, and it didn't feel as cushioned or bouncy. It felt more responsive or a little bit more firm, which is actually a pretty good thing. And as for ground feel, I actually didn't feel any ground feel in the shoe. I mean, given the high stack height as well as a full length air bubble under your foot, I would doubt you feel the ground. So overall, the cushion setup, just from a first run review, I thought was pretty promising. I'm excited to put more miles on the shoe as well as do different paces like recovery pace, as well as a longer run in the shoe to see how the cushion reacts. Now, I do want to touch on stability, as that was probably my main concern for the cushion setup. And I will say that this shoe is a little bit more narrow of a base. As you can see, it's right where the heel counter ends is also where the outsole and the midsole end. So it is a pretty narrow shoe when it comes to a base perspective. And when you typically put a full length air unit on a shoe that's really soft and really cushioned, as well as pair it with a high stack height, typically you get a little bit of instability. Now, I did feel that while I was walking in the shoe, especially if you're a heavy heel striker. If your form isn't really on point or perfect, especially while walking, you're gonna feel like your ankles are maybe at risk. And as you're running though, I do feel that it kind of firms up a little bit and it feels a little bit more stable. I would say when you're running a little bit slower, I did feel a little bit of instability in the heel when I was pressing down. You definitely have to kind of watch where you're walking and watch where you're running when it comes to the heel strike. But I found when I was striking on the midfoot to forefoot area that it was decently stable. I think the midfoot strike was definitely the most stable in this shoe. When I was striking on the forefoot, just to, mess around, I typically don't forefoot strike when I run, but I just wanted to see how it felt. I did feel that there was a little bit of instability on the lateral side, and I felt like I could roll a little bit towards the lateral side when I was forefoot striking. So I would say that this shoe is probably best for midfoot strikers, maybe a little bit of heel strikers, and maybe a little bit of forefoot strikers if you have really good form or you don't have any problems with stability issues. But that's just from a first impressions point of view. So moving on to the upper of the shoe, I think this is a knitted mesh upper, or it feels kind of like a mix between knit and mesh. And honestly, the upper feels pretty lightweight and pretty minimal, which I really like. I'm a big fan of shoes that kind of have maximum cushion and a really light upper because I feel like it helps the weight. And this upper felt pretty decent. I would say that it feels really lightweight. The breathability seems to be very good. When I do the light test, I can see a lot of light shining through the holes and perforations on the upper. And just the materials in general feel decently premium, which I would expect at that ginormous price point of $210. The upper materials were good. Ventilation was decent on the first run. And as for the fit, I typically go size 12 in all my running shoes. I have a slightly wider than average foot. And I did feel that this shoe, especially in the forefoot, felt a little bit snug, but it wasn't snug to the point where I would have gone for a wide option, which I don't think they make in the Pegasus Premium, or I wouldn't go half a size up because I think then it would be too long. I thought that it actually fit my foot really, really well. But like I said, when it comes to the platform of the shoe, if you're worried about stability or maybe you run on uneven terrain a lot, I don't think that this is going to be the best shoe because it is pretty narrow based. And I don't think that the stability of the cushion setup is the most stable. So that's something to keep in mind. But I would recommend going true to size if you can't try them on yourself. As for heel lockdown, I did try the shoe without the runner's loop and I did try it with the runner's loop. With the runner's loop, I did feel like the laces were biting a little bit into my ankle, which I personally don't really like. And without the runner's loop, I didn't feel like my heel was completely locked down in both shoes. I felt a little bit of slippage on my right foot, but I was able to run with both the runner's loop and the non-runner's loop, just like a short while with the runner's loop because I only ran 2 miles. So I stopped and kind of retied the shoes just to see how it feel like. But I didn't like that cinching down feeling, but I'm gonna test both variations of tying the shoes as I test the shoe further and further, especially for the long run. So overall, my first impression of the Nike Pegasus Premium was that it was decent. I think, for the price point of $210 though, I already have a feeling that this shoe is definitely not worth that price point. I think that a lot of people are gravitating towards this shoe because it is a good looking shoe as well as it's maybe more of a lifestyle shoe. It kind of looks or reminds me of the Air Max 97, but maybe even more comfortable than that shoe because I personally always like a Zoom airbag over a traditional Nike airbag. So yeah, I don't exactly know if this is going to be the best value or the best running shoe on the market, but it definitely does have a lot of hype surrounding it. So I'm going to continue putting on the miles on the shoe, but first impressions, it was decent. I wouldn't say it was anything mind-blowing. I wouldn't be waiting in line to drop $210 on this shoe for me personally, but if you are a Nike fan or you do like the design or you maybe want to wear these casually, I will warn you though that if you want to walk around in these a lot, it might kind of hurt your knees or hurt your joints a little bit because of the unstable base. But if you are interested in the shoe, I'm not gonna stop you from buying them. But yeah, these are just my first impressions and hopefully I'll be able to get a better sense of how the shoe performs as I put more miles on the shoe. So that's gonna pretty much wrap up the first run review. Thank you guys so much for watching and make sure you stay tuned for the full review coming soon.